I think a commissioned position is very different than what we are discussing today.
Representative Omar, I mentioned the fact that it's not just limited to commission. It's also for anybody that is demoted. So you can be in a regular job, not part of a commission situation, but if you're failing to perform, you'll get demoted, and then you get a pay cut with it. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. So I know Representative O'Neill has that experience having owned a business, and so I think she was speaking to that.
That is a ridiculous question, and I
Yes or no?
No.
I will take that as a yes.
I am not going to respond to that kind of personal attack, which is not a question.
What's up, Patriots? Welcome back. I've seen some wild moments in the halls of Congress, but today takes it to a whole new level of unpreparedness. We're watching Representative Ilhan Omar step into the ring with two people who actually understand how the world operates. First, she tries to lecture Elliot Abrams, a man whose mastery of foreign policy far outpaces anything she's dealt with. Then, she shifts to giving a room full of business leaders a crash course on managing payroll. Plus, despite never having run even the smallest operation herself. The boldness is remarkable. Here's a congresswoman with her own controversies, acting like the ultimate moral authority, questioning people who've spent decades in the trenches. It's almost surreal. Let's jump straight into the first clip, where she attempts a gotcha with Abrams and ends up looking completely out of her depth, like a rookie stumbling through a debate.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you for your testimonies. Mr. Adams, in 1991, you pleaded guilty to 2 counts of withholding information from Congress regarding your involvement in the Iran-Contra affair, for which you were later pardoned by President George H.W. Bush. I fail to understand why members of this committee or the American people should find any testimony that you give today to be truthful.
If I can respond to that.
It wasn't a question. That was not a question. I reserve the right to my time.
It is not right.
That was not a question.
Committee can attack
on February
a witness
8th,
who is not permitted to reply.
That was not a question. Thank you for your participation. On February 8th, 1982, you testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee about U.S. policy in El Salvador. In that hearing, you dismissed as communist propaganda report about the massacre of El Mozote, in which more than 800 civilians, including children as young as 2 years old, were brutally murdered by U.S. trained troops. During that massacre, some of those troops bragged about raping a 12-year-old girl before they killed them. Girls before they killed them. You later said that the U.S. policy in El Salvador was a fabulous achievement. Yes or no, do you still think so?
From the day that President Duarte was elected in a free election to this day, El Salvador has been a democracy. That's a fabulous achievement.
Yes or no, do you think that massacre was a fabulous achievement that happened under our watch?
That is a ridiculous question, and
yes or no?
No.
I will take that as a yes.
I am not going to respond to that kind of personal attack, which is not a question.
Yes or no, would you support an armed faction within Venezuela that engages in war crimes, crimes against humanity or genocide, if you believe they were serving U.S. interest, as you did in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua?
I am not going to respond to that question. I'm sorry. I don't think this entire line of questioning is meant to be real questions, and so I will not reply.
Whether under your watch, a genocide will take place, and you will look the other way because American interests were being upheld, is a fair question. Because the American people want to know that anytime we engage a country, that we think about what our actions could be and how we believe our values are being furthered. That is my question. Will you make sure that human rights are not violated and that we uphold international and human rights?
I suppose there is a question in there, and the answer is that the entire thrust of American policy in Venezuela is to support the Venezuelan people's effort to restore democracy to their country. That's our policy.
I don't think anybody disputes that. The question I had for you is that does the interest of the United States include protecting human rights and include protecting people against genocide?
That is always the position of the United States.
Thank you, Chair. Representative O'Neill, I'm just wondering, as a union member for a long time, and I've also gotten an opportunity to work in the private sector, and I'm curious to know if you know of any employer that has a provision where they decrease pay for employees. I find that a little strange, and so I just wanted to know where that thought comes from, and if you know where an employee gets their pay decreased.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I was a business owner. I recently sold my share, so I don't own it anymore, but there are plenty of businesses out there, especially those that depend on employees' productivity, like I was in the trades. So I owned a company that was a tile setting company, and if we didn't get out there and do the work, and if I didn't have highly productive employees, they were paid based on their productivity. So if they had issues, it is very possible that their pay would reflect those issues. If they were on probation for something, for some sort of violation, that could be coordinated with a pay reduction. It's something that businesses do all the time, and it could be the step before someone is actually fired. So it's an important thing, and it gets people's attention, when they see it in their paycheck that their performance does not meet the standard.
Representative Omar.
Hudson, I think, did you have some things?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Hudson? Was there a question for Mr. Hudson?
No, I think he was saying that he wanted to add something, so I didn't know if he had something to add.
Mr. Hudson, is there a response to the question? Do you have a response to that question?
Madam Chair, yes, ma'am.
Saying that you aren't aware of any businesses that decrease pay? Because that was the question.
Madam Chair, I think what Chair O'Neill perhaps could be referring to, there are some instances where the pay structure is different. So for an example, she had indicated that she had come out of the towel industry. I'm not sure if these were commissioned employees who may have been on like an 80-20 split. In that instance, there is a situation where a pay might be reduced. Or if we have a supervisor who perhaps had a performance improvement issue or a behavioral concern, and we demoted this supervisor, that is an instance where pay might be decreased. But just an employee who has not been under some sort of performance improvement program, having their pay reduced, I've never heard of that.
Well, Mr. Hudson, I think Representative Neal knows exactly what she says. And I think we've had a little conversation back here when the question was asked. I know Representative Uglum, do you want to speak to that point?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Omar, if you happen to be a salesman in this world, and you can be selling cars, you could be selling siding, you could be selling just about anything, and you are paid on commission. So if you don't sell anything, you don't make anything. So you can have good years, you can have bad years. Probably really one of the best examples is a real estate agent. So it's the idea that people can can make less money year to year, not to mention all the bonus situations that are out there in industry. It happens. It happens a lot. It doesn't necessarily happen, here in the public sector, but it's pervasive and very, very common in the private sector. Thank you.
And I'd like to add that in the private sector as well, people, if they are not performing at their job, get demoted, and with that demotion comes a pay cut. And that's not even related to being in a commission position, that's just in a regular position as well. Representative Omar.
I think a commissioned position is very different than what we are discussing today.
Representative Omar, I mentioned the fact that it's not just limited to commission. It's also for anybody that is demoted. So you can be in a regular job, not part of a commission situation, but if you're failing to perform, you'll get demoted, and then you get a pay cut with it. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. So I know Representative O'Neill has that experience having owned a business, and so I think she was speaking to that.
I'm honestly cringing for her. Boys, did you see the expressions on those business owners' faces? They had to explain to a United States representative how commissions work, that if you don't perform, your earnings reflect it, that if you're demoted, your paycheck adjusts accordingly. This is basic economics, yet she sits there with a self-satisfied smirk, as if she's uncovered some grand injustice. No, Ilhan, it's called merit. It's called the private sector. It's how the real world operates outside of government circles. She even tries to backtrack, claiming commission is different, when the principle is exactly the same. Value determines pay. Her surprise reveals everything about her perspective. She seems to think effort alone should guarantee rewards. From foreign policy to the fundamentals of running a business, she consistently prioritizes image over substance. Elliot, Abrams, and those entrepreneurs didn't just answer her questions. They highlighted that she's completely out of her depth. And the bottom line, Ilhan Omar is playing in a league far beyond her experience, and the results are painfully obvious. So what do you think? Out of touch, or is DC just full of strong competition? Drop your thoughts, and if you're tired of this kind of chaos, hit like and subscribe.